Okay, everyone, welcome to the I Am an Icon podcast. This is the first episode. Today with me, I have Dr. Barbara Bridges. She is the founder and executive director of Art to Change the World. Barbara has been an artist, a teacher, a college professor for over 40 years with some amazing experiences. Her social practice sculptures have been exhibited in Maine, Miami, the Virgin Islands, Maryland, Chicago, Mexico, and also throughout the Minnesota and other places. And I think Barbara brings a very, very great perspective to the space of artists, to mental health. And as we dive into our conversation, you'll get to learn a lot about her experiences. And I hope that you take this as a space to learn, to grow, and to connect. Barbara, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
I'm honored and delighted to be here.
Thank you. And so, as you all know, Icon Podcast is all about being an ecosystem of support for young girls and women to not accept violence as a form of love and to learn to stand in their own being. And so, Barbara, really one of my I'm super excited. One, I just want to let people know that like when we first connected, it changed my life. You know, I was in a time where I really needed a space to like, one, just be myself, but also get connected with people who were doing game changing things. And so I want people to know that like you are a game changer and you are someone who I feel is a very real person and brings their true selves to every space. And so I'm grateful for that. And in our current state of the world, as we are thinking about mental health and, you know, healing and trauma, and I know you have a lot of expertise in that, I wanted to ask you, first of all, what do you think we need more of in our current state around mental health and trauma?
Well, first of all, I want to say that you may see me as a game changer, but you were a game changer to ACW. So I think it was one of those symbiotic relationships that you came to us just when we needed somebody to help us think about a different way of being in the digital world. And so that right back at you. We changed your life, but you changed our life too. So that's when it's the best. So tell me the question again.
So the question really is focused on mental health and trauma. What do you think we need more of currently? Because as you know, like with COVID and the events of George Floyd and like our community essentially cry for like needing more support from all the traumatic experiences. What do you think
we need a safe space to be able to communicate with each other. One of the things that is, I think, the most powerful about ACW is that we are 16 to 86. We are every single point of reference you can possibly imagine. And we come together and we have the hard conversations. And, you know, we say we're doing our messy best because sometimes they are hard. But we're not stuck in some silo. We're think-alike silos is what I call them. So number one, we need to inform ourselves, but not just from one data stream. We need to inform ourselves from many different points of view because people that are suffering from trauma are coming at that experience from every different point of reference. And so what might work for me might not work for you.
That is so true. I think that's a really good point of like, how do we create spaces that really showcase that equality for everyone and give people that diversity in space, because like you said, it might not work for one person, but may work for the other. And so as I dive deeper into really being able to like show, you know, who you are, I do want to know. So, and I sent you these questions, so I hope, you know, thought about these. But my first question, just to really unleash the icon within you and within us all, what do you want your life to be about? I know you have so much experience, but I definitely want to hear like, what is Dr. Barbara's life mission? What do you want your life to be about?
Well, you don't stay in teaching for 40 years if you don't consider yourself living to serve and serving to live, as the old saying goes. And so my son, when he was in middle school, what are you, 12 or 13, wrote an article and about how there was no such thing as altruism. because when people do that, they actually are getting a rush off it. So then it can't be altruistic because they're getting something out of it, right? So I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm the happiest not doing for others in any sort of, patriarchy kind of way, but opening doors is the way I like to think about it, is opening doors and say, here's what I know about what's in there so far. Go check it out. That's when I'm the happiest, when I'm able to provide resources for people so they can seize the power in their life.
Mm. And can you give us like an example of like when you've seen like your life mission, like what you want to be doing come into play?
Well, I started Art to Change the World as my little sunset, my retirement project after I left higher ed, retired from higher ed. And I imagined it being a collective. And boy, that was a hard slog those first few years, because people were used to organizations where you pay a due and then you fold your arms and you have this now serve me attitude. So that was really difficult for me and the people who believed in this collective model for us to move that forward. But this year, people are coming with ideas, they form committees, they take the minutes, they design the project, and then they implementing the project with very little oversight from me. So I think that's an example of me putting the things I've learned so far out there. And I reserve the right to say, nah, you may want to reconsider that. Sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. And that's beautiful. That's my goal.
That's awesome. And I think like even with just like, having those goals and the amazing experience that you have, being able to like see that come to fruition is like a really great thing. So with all that being said, I do want to dive a little deeper. And if you don't know, you guys, ICON stands for I Can Overcome Negativity. So you will get to really understand how the leaders that you're listening to have overcame negativity. And so, Barbara, that really brings me into my next question. How have you overcame negativity? And I know this is such a big question. There's different incidents that
it
we
is a
go.
big question. Yeah, it is a big question. And, when we have negativity in our lives, sometimes we bring it to the party, and then sometimes other people bring it to the party. And I think that my particular life, there were people in it making decisions that I didn't have anything to do with that impacted me greatly. And most of this is their stories to tell, but I can share that I was in a very dysfunctional marriage where part of that was the time. And there was alcohol and violence involved with it. And I stayed in it and stayed in it and stayed in it and stayed in it because I was a good Catholic girl and I said I do. And so, I did. And I would empower and encourage everybody, when you know you're in a situation in your heart that's not right, then have the courage to get out of it. I just, that's one of my regrets, is that I didn't do that. And it contributed to who I am now. And so the way I've overcome the negativity is I just say that is then and here is now. And I'm pretty happy with my life now, with what's going on in my life. And if all of that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be me.
Mm. That's so powerful. And as I hear you talk about like, having that courage, was there ever a moment where, and I know it could have been, a year down the road or later, like when was that first kind of like light or, something that turned on that ignited that said, you know what, I need to change this situation, or this is not right, or this violence doesn't feel like love. Like when was that first realization for you?
This is the answer to that is terrible. There was an intervention and infidelity was emerged and revealed during the addiction intervention. And so that did it for me. That was enough. So I can't take credit for just saying, okay, that's enough. And, I also want to encourage particularly the older and the younger women who are listening to this, and the men who are listening to this, and the fluid who are listening to this, that that was a different time. The options weren't there for me like they are now. The resources weren't there for me like they are now. What I would encourage is there are so many resources out there now. I know that you're involved with some domestic abuse shelters. They weren't any place where I was. And I also want to encourage anyone who's listening, who's from the upper middle class. I was from the upper middle class. I had lots of money. Okay. But that in some ways even held me a tighter hostage because I didn't want people to know. Right. Forget that. Who cares who knows? Run to freedom, run to security.
Mm-hmm. I think that's such a good point, because there are communities where like you don't want your status or something to be damaged, essentially, or whatever term you use, if you're trying to speak on your truth. And, unfortunately, we look down on people who are trying to speak their truth when it's like, it's essentially a public health issue at its finest that we still don't talk about. And it's such a hush hush. And, family issues sometimes, are looked at, I shouldn't say sometimes, but they are all looked at as something sacred, and we shouldn't talk about them outside the home. But, that's where our health really starts. If our homes are not healthy, our worlds won't be. And so I think it's super important, like even what you just said, speaking up, no matter your financial status or whatever, because it's super important, and get yourself healthy. So into my next question, what would be one piece of advice you would give your 16-year-old self?
I've always been pretty sassy, Bianca, big surprise. I was going to Washington when I was 17 years old, demonstrating against the Vietnam War. And so, I've always been involved with political action, every single issue that came. That's why these last 4 years were just so dreadful. It was like I rolled a stone uphill, a boulder all my life. And all of a sudden, I thought I was at the top, and it rolled back on us, for 4 years there. And so, that was really, really difficult. So, I would encourage, no matter what your age, go make a difference, make something that counts. We have 400 members in ACW. I'm one person. One person can make a difference. So if you're young, decide that you're going to stand up for your own ethics, your own morals. And if you have a 16-year-old in your life, let them do that. Because sometimes they want to do things you don't like. Right? But if it's not harmful, mentally or physically or spiritually, then let them go for
it. That's so true. Just giving young people the space to live and to learn, but to also like trust their guts and not really quiet their intuitions. Because I feel like we do that a lot of times, and like those intuitions we need, right, to make our world a better place. So this kind of goes back into like living your life, your truth, I should say, every day. So what is something that you want to be doing more and more of each day? How are you getting closer to your truth? What is something that you feel like you should be doing more and more of each day?
Well, I'm a big supporter of the three-legged stool philosophy, mind, body, and spirit. And if any one of those legs are not being taken care of, you're not a healthy individual, and you can't be helpful to yourself, and you can't be helpful to anyone around you. So, I definitely keep my mind busy and my spirit, but I'm not taking care of my body. And that as you age, take it from me, as you age, that becomes more and more and more critical. So I always put myself last. I don't have time to go out and play pickleball. I don't have time to go out and walk because I've got to do this. I got to do this. I got to make the profit and loss statement for ACW. And I part of this is my age too. And maybe, I don't know, is this the same? It's still the same, Bianca? Is women were just told if they did anything for themselves, they were selfish.
It's still
right. So that. Is it the same now? Yeah, so that was just drilled into me, for a lifetime. And so when I do those things now and do things that feed my spirit, I always feel a little bit guilty.
How do you work through that?
I try to be mindful. I have lists. I'm still old school. I have lists that I run my whole life off. So I get up in the morning and I look at it and I write right on my calendar, walk with Leia. So I have a friend that I walk down to the Mississippi River. It's about a 5-mile walk down and back. So
Wow.
I walk with Leia twice a week. I try to play pickleball twice a week. And then I do, intensive maintenance and yard work on my house here, the other days. So I try to get up, I have it on my calendar every day and do something intensely physical at the beginning of the day. And am I always successful at that? No, because I get up at 5 o'clock and start working on, bookkeeping stuff for ACW. And the next thing I know, it's 11 o'clock. So, so I'm not always successful with that, but that's my goal. And if it's not your goal, you definitely won't get there.
But you're like building that intention of like, this is what I want. This is how I know I'm gonna, achieve that like balance of like work and life and health. And like, I'm making that attention. I think that's like that's super good. Do you ever incorporate any type of like self affirmations in your regimen, or what does that look like?
No, I'm an individual that needs affirmation from other people. It's one of my challenges, Bianca, and people generally don't do that. So I don't get a lot of it. And I could use more of that. I try to feel good about, within myself about the work that I'm doing. If I manage to, my compulsivity, my addiction is food because I'm a comfort eater. And so all of the tragedy and the addiction that I went through in my life with other people, the way that I dealt with it was I just ate and ate and ate some more. So I have to, carbohydrates are my devil. I have to keep them out of my house. So I try not to equate, eat that piece of cake and you'll feel better. I try to equate, go out and work in your garden and you'll feel better. But, reprogramming yourself after 50 years is not easy. So if you start young thinking that way, but I also do things that bring me joy, that are just for me. I went out to Maine to tend my mother. She's 92, living in the house I grew up in. And when I landed there, I rented a convertible instead of a regular car.
Yes.
So I wrote, and I felt guilty, and other people tried to make me feel guilty about it. And I went, nope, I'm putting my Wayfarers on and I'm putting the top down. And I enjoyed that. I would never buy one. It's extravagant, but I loved that 2 weeks I spent driving around in one. So, I mean, those are the kinds of things that I allow myself to do now.
That's so awesome. I mean, I love that you just like you said, you just did it. Like other people can't make you feel guilty about like, oh, they should not. I shouldn't say they can't, but because they can, they will try. But they shouldn't make you feel guilty, about you doing something like that. Like I think that is so, so good. Well, I do want to affirm you and just let you know, Barbara, never lose your sparkle because I know you have it.
Thanks, Bianca.
Yes. And so, so again, Icon, all about empowering young girls and women to stand in their own being. So to me, can you tell us a little bit about what do you think standing in your own being means and what that looks like and what that does not look like?
That was a great question. Of all the things that you asked me, I thought, what does that really mean? And have I always done that? And, if not, then I should be doing that. And I've always had a great sense of justice. Like I was the one that was always standing up for the kid that was getting picked on at the schoolyard. And so that I think is part of my being, but you can't, I call it, my embrace cognitive dissonance thing. And that was my academic claim to fame. Embracing people who are embedded in their own worldviews. And, you could think that that was standing up for their being because, hey, I have these opinions and I'm going to stand up for them. But if you think your truth is the only truth, wow, where's that going to go? Because there's 7 billion people on the planet, and to think that you're the one that came up with the only one truth, yikes, that's a little bit overwhelming and arrogant. And so I think it's really important that you stand up for what you believe, you have ethics and morals and borders that you do not cross, but also stay open to realizing, wow, that thing I always believed, I can see right in front of me, that doesn't seem to be true. So keep yourself open to be flexible.
I love that. Like, having those morals, ethics, like that you can kind of guide and help you navigate standing your own being, but still being open and flexible to like new opportunities, experiences, and mindsets, because that's how we grow.
Right.
And I think like you don't want to be stubborn in it, but you want to make sure like you are giving yourself the space to grow. I love that flexibility piece in it.
Well, and if you're a positive force in the world, Bianca, then you can be confident. I'm a positive force in the world, and don't let people pick at you, because people do that to me. They'll pick and they're not contributing anything, but something's always wrong with what you're doing. And at the end of the day, if you're living as a kind and compassionate person and trying to be a positive force in the world, I mean, I've said to people before who just won't stop, and I've said things like, wow, that really hurt my feelings. Was that your intention? And then they still don't stop. Here's my response. And this may sound kind of mean, but when I've had enough, I'll say, you know what? I have a solution for this. If you don't like what you see, look away.
I completely agree.
I mean, that's after I've tried to be nice. I've tried to,
I love that. You can just look away. It takes a simple gesture. that is so good. And so, as we talked about standing in your own being, I stand really strongly on the phrase that violence is not love. I want to hear other people's opinions about why do they think we've accepted violence as love for so long, and why are we still having to have this conversation, Barbara?
That is a really good question, because while I was living in that, I was teaching human relations for a teacher licensure program and telling my female students not to ever put up with that. So you see the contradiction. I mean, you have to, and that's why I said solutions are going to be different for different people. I was held hostage by being told if I broke the circle of secrecy, that the family's financial security would be threatened if I told what was going on, right? And when I finally went to Al-Anon and shared that, they all laughed like donkeys. They said, oh my God, that's the classic way to keep you quiet. So don't worry about what the consequences are. You need to take care of yourself. And if, frequently children are involved, so it gets very complicated, you need to take care of that first. And that doesn't mean that you may not love the person who's doing this. And I left. That isn't always the solution. Finally left, but my children were grown by that time. It's not always the solution. It's a very complicated situation. I beg everybody, there are so many resources out there that were not there when I was going through this. So reach out to the people who are experts at this, who know what to do about this, and try to get the whole family, even the perpetrator, into the circle, because they can get saved too. They can completely get saved too.
I love that you said that, because, as I'm even taking more time to like learn about domestic violence and family violence and, partner violence, the ultimate goal is to not break up families. Right. At the end of the day, it's going to harm the children, the woman, the man who, and so like, to me, it's like, that's not the ultimate goal. We don't want to break up families. We want families to be successful, to be healthy. It's just, like you said, it's figuring out these resources and trying to get everyone help, because a lot of what I see in these situations are that mental health, that the abuser doesn't have. And then of course, after the one who's been victimized is going to need that mental health piece. You know, there's just a whole cycle of things that begin to happen. And then you have the trauma on the children. And, you know, essentially everyone needs that help. And we forget to mention like the trauma that, you know, the abusers have had, you know, the
I
experiences
was
that
just
they've
going to
had.
say who's really the victim, because in
Exactly.
the end you're all the victims.
We're all
But
victims.
also, particularly when you're dealing with younger children, and even when they're older, when you have a child with someone, they're in your life until one of you stops breathing. I mean, that's pretty much always the way it is. So it makes more sense if everybody gets healthy, because that individual is going to be in your life.
Mm.
And you loved him enough to have these children with him or her. You know, I don't want to make this gender specific. So it's worth it, but everybody has to be willing. And the first thing we have to do is erase this stigma, because often chemicals are involved with all of this. Okay. And what I learned is that 98% of people who are addicts are suffering and self-medicating from some kind of mood disorder, great or small. So
Mm.
that's what, and the stigma against so-called mental illness, I don't like to use that word anymore. I mean, a chemical imbalance makes much more sense, because that's what it is. So you need, you know, often you need to adjust the chemistry, and then things will get better. But to say to somebody who's suffering from a mood disorder, an anxiety disorder, and they just want to jump out of their skin, and so opiates are good because they can feel normal, to just stop, it is cruel. They can't just stop.
Mm-hmm. Because if they were able to, they probably would have most
They
likely
would have
done.
done it. And you know, and we, all this misinformation, I feel guilty that I was so uninformed. Maybe things would have gone differently if I hadn't been so uninformed and there was nothing out there for me to look at. Because what we're taught is if they loved you, they'd stop,
Mm.
which is nonsense.
And why do you
Yeah,
think we have the health practitioners helping stop if they could do it on their own?
right. Exactly.
Mm.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you think it's something that our, you know, medical field, our, you know, our people that practice and these health practitioners could be doing differently?
I've done a lot of work now, so I've been in lots of family situations and seen lots of different dynamics. And it's getting a tiny little bit better, but they don't communicate with each other, because behavioral therapists are important, and then the psychiatrists who do the chemicals are important. Usually you need both of those in order to get well, but they don't
Mm.
communicate with each other and with the general practitioner. And I kind of get it, that takes more time, but it's so dysfunctional. There should be a team that works together to try to help people.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I can agree even more. I think that, like you said, that they need that ecosystem of like support. Like it's not just a one and done thing or this appointment. You know, there's so much that like needs to be done on an ongoing basis. That yeah, I can agree more. And so my last question is, I want to know who have been those icons in your life. Who are the people you've, you know, been able to learn from that overcame negativity? Who are those icons in your life?
Oh, you didn't let me prep for that one. People who have overcome, I mean, it's hard to know when, I mean, famous people, you don't really know what their backstory is, you know, or what their life has been like. Um, I tend to really admire um, in women who were groundbreakers in their day. For instance, an example is Nancy Pelosi. Now, you might like or not like Nancy Pelosi as a politician, but she was doing this 40 years ago when women weren't even allowed at the table. And if they were at the table, they needed to be quiet and listen, you know? And so I admire people who were way ahead of their time. I'm a real Ruth Bader Ginsburg fan, although I think she should have gotten up off the court when Biden was in there. And I guess her own hubris prevented her from doing that. So I really like those kinds of, I mean, I really support those kinds of groundbreaking individuals. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah, that answered my question
Mm,
completely. And it definitely like even some, puts in perspective, just some of the views that you've expressed. I think like having those women who, like you said, been in the game, even when it wasn't okay to speak up, but stood there and fought for like that space for us and are now able to give like generations behind them that platform. So
mm,
I mean, that's amazing. I believe that they're icons in my eyes. So that's awesome.
yeah. I mean, we have a member named Rhoda Olson who started Great Clips. It's $1 billion corporation. And her values are kindness, respect, KISS, keep it simple, stupid, trust. And at the end of like an end of a list of all things like that, performance was in there, was have fun.
Mm.
And she built $1 billion corporation with those values. So it can be done. You can be a decent human being and do big things, even involving money. Okay. So, I mean, I found that to be so affirmational and encouraging because I really try to get the ACW members to see it as a family model where they can come together and feel safe and talk, but also to do big things, So.
And I completely agree. And that, I mean, that is why like ACW is such a huge platform, especially for artists who are looking for that community like that and being a part of something like just bigger than them. Essentially, they're leaving that footprint, but leaving it for others to follow behind. And
I'm trying. I'm trying. I was getting grumpy at the task force meeting a couple of weeks ago because I said, you've got to take the lead. You've got to take the reins and go. And I said, listen, I get down to Mexico and I do dangerous stuff. I scuba dive, I ride on motorcycles, I go out on the Pacific in sailboats. If I don't come back, I don't want ACW to die. And they were all like, whoa.
Somebody's gonna have to keep this going.
Yeah.
And so like everyone listening, I will be putting more about art to change the world in our YouTube description because if you're an artist out there or just someone who simply wants to be a part of like a great organization, you definitely are going to want to be a part of ACW as they're like growing and growing so much. And you don't want to miss getting on the bandwagon because trust me, it will change your life. So I'll put more information in our description about ACW so you can get connected. Well, Barbara, it has been such a pleasure to connect with you and talk with you as always, and to always hear your story and your experiences. Because, again, like I am a true believer that once we all tell our story, we continue to heal ourselves and then get to an opportunity to heal and inspire others. So, thank you so much.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you as well, Bianca. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.